Hello, everyone. We're so glad that you're here viewing the KVEC Virtual Fire Summit. What we want to share with you today during this presentation is about our pilot program called Narrative 4. We are partnering with the program of Narrative 4 to introduce and to let our students experience not only local, state, national, but an international program that allows them to use reading and writing and stories to share and learn about each other. In fact, I love the motto of the Narrative 4 program. It's the power of the story exchange. This year we're going to have 7 districts involved in this program, 6 high schools, 2 middle schools, and 1 elementary. And as you proceed through this, watch this video, the PowerPoint that has the links will be made available to you on the holler so that you can go back. So what I want to do right now is to introduce Mary Sloan, who is here with me. Mary will be leading the KVEC Narrative 4 Appalachian cohort. Mary has been involved with this program in her high school for 4 years now, and I'm going to let her elaborate a little bit on that. But Mary is a Narrative 4 master practitioner, because she has been involved with this program so long. So I'm going to turn it over to Mary, and she is going to share all of the wonderful opportunities that we're getting ready to offer our students.
I want to thank you, Carol, for that wonderful introduction. And as you all notice on the first slide, prepare to be amazed. So as we're looking at the mission statement of Narrative 4, there are 2 things I would like for you to really focus on, and that is how this program harnesses the power of the story exchange, and it is to equip young adults. And as we go through this presentation, and as you watch the evolution of my students' experience in Narrative 4, you are going to have a visual experience as they improve their own lives, their communities, and the world. Narrative 4 has only been around for 8 years. And as you can see, it has had this beautiful little circuitous path to get to the moment that we're in right now. And during those 8 years that Narrative 4 has been evolving, we're going to look at this program by the numbers. Since this is an empathy organization, one of the things that they have chosen to do and what we've chosen to do is to focus our story exchanges in 5 themes. And as you look at those 5 themes, you're going to see they are anything but easy. Faith, identity, violence, immigration, and environment will course through all the programming that we do. We are now in 12 countries and in 20 states, mostly in the Northeast and Southeast. And one of the things that I'm most proud of personally is the fact that Narrative 4 is currently in 200 schools. And as you will notice, Floyd Central High School is listed as one of the premier schools that they have. There have been over 1,000 trained facilitators, and we are over 48,000 story exchanges and counting. Now, at this point, you're probably saying, well, really, Mary, what is a story exchange? And this model allows participants to do what Atticus had asked Scout to do, and that is to really try to walk into someone else's shoes for a little while so you can see things from their perspective. And that's what Narrative 4 does. It partners up people. For example, if Carol and I were partners, we would go off, we would share a story with one another from our personal life. Then we would come back to a larger group, and we would actually tell one another's stories in first person. And if you're interested in knowing, there's all kinds of brain research that's out there right now on what happens to you physically, physiologically, when you tell someone's story in that way. And it's interesting because at the heart of all of this is this idea of empathy. And we say that word a lot, but here is a wonderful illustration about the components of empathy. And it's not just seeing the world from someone else's point of view. It's also seeking to understand their feelings. And when you understand those feelings, you're able to actually communicate that understanding back. And ultimately, the goal of empathy is for us to appreciate one another as human beings without judgment. And now I'm going to show you a pictorial evolution of how this has worked with my students since I have been introduced to this program. So 4 years ago, on a very awkward phone call, this story exchange was actually described to me. And so what I did is in the fall, I went to my classroom and we actually did a story exchange in a room full of freshmen. Because one of the things that you're going to learn and that I have learned is you really can't have empathy for other people if you cannot curate it in yourself and in your own community. And after we had that experience, which so deepened the culture of our classroom, we were invited to partner up with the school in the Bronx that's called University Heights High School. And as you can see, I mean, it was basically us looking at these, what I always call the big board, and having students just have communication with one another. For example, one of the biggest things that we got out of this cursory experience is, I'll never forget, is the discussion of pizza. Probably the most profound thing that happened is when the students from the South Bronx realized that we buy whole pizza, not by the slice. It really bumfuzzled everybody. But because of this experience, you will see on the photograph on the right, my student, Katie, and I were invited to participate in a global summit in Limerick. And as you can see in that photograph, those are also representatives from University Heights High School. And so we started seeing that the burgeoning possibilities of what Narrative 4 could do with us, for us, and with empathy. So the next year, I transitioned to a new high school. And as you can see on the left, in year 2, what we did as soon as we got to Floyd Central is in my creative writing class, we actually followed that same model. We had a story exchange within the classroom. And I will always say that we were the actual first Jaguar class of our school just because of the experience they had with the story exchange. Because we wanted to kind of up the ante for what we were doing with University Heights, you will see that what we evolved into is not just groups talking to one another. We actually paired students up between the schools and had a virtual story exchange. So you will see that people used their personal laptops or their cellular devices and they exchanged stories, which led to this photograph on the right where students would go to the screen with their partners and they would actually share one another's stories. That eventually evolved into this field exchange. And the field exchange was a proposal that was sent to Narrative 4, and they've actually allowed for University Heights High School students to come to Kentucky and for us to do that vice versa. And here you can see us greeting them. And while they were here in the fall of 2018 for 1 week, we actually followed through with those 5 themes and participated in a variety of activities and outreach programs. And you can already see the impact that week had on students. We obviously reciprocated last spring and were able to go to the South Bronx. And while there, you will see that within this network, you have people like Ishmael Baya and Colin McCann, who are artists who are more than willing to work with students. And also, because of this network we have with Narrative 4, we're paired up with a school in Tampico, Mexico. And here you have where these 4th graders actually created Mexican folk art that's called Alebrijes, presented that to my students, who in turn created poems that we sent to their kids so they could see this connection between this high school in southeastern Kentucky and this school in Tampico. And from there, we also did a project in our school that the students created and implemented to engender school culture and to really create empathy in our school. And what's really been exciting is that in the second year of our field exchange, you will see, yes, our students are back together again, and this time we started in the Northeast, but we have now been into 3 states with our students presenting, doing community outreach, reflecting on that shared experience. And this year, because of all of the wealth of opportunities that we have with Narrative 4, you're going to see that here's a man, his name is John Lombardo, and like me, he's a master practitioner, and he's in South Africa. And when my students found out that the program that he's with that these kids that in Port Elizabeth have such dire experiences in education that they were going to do a protest walk. My students said, Miss Sloan, what can we do? And they actually talked to him, and what you see in these two slides are a prime example. Because what they did a campaign where these kids did these virtual posters telling who they were and why they were walking. My students each adopted one of these students, did a similar virtual poster, and in the middle, what you will see is a snapshot of a video where my students for 1 week volunteered throughout our school to walk for 1 mile together. And then they made a video saying that we're walking this mile for you. Now,
before we move away from this, Mary, one thing I'd like for you to share very quickly is how we wanted you to share the international and national things that happen, but what about right in your school? Because you had 2 high schools that had to come together, and so there were kids that didn't know each other, and you had shared a little bit with me about how you handled that just within your own school.
yes, thank you, Carol, for that question, because what we ended up doing in that first year when I had that creative writing class that I mentioned, I had 30 students. And it just so happened that 15 had come from South Floyd and 15 from Allen Central. And when we did that story exchange, and I was able to pair up students from both schools, a richness developed in that classroom. And because of that richness, that led to some of those pictures that you saw at our school where we did an Empathy into Action project, where we actually had my students identify 50 students of influence in our school. And they created prompts, invited students, also invited key personnel that students chose, that they wanted them to participate in a story exchange. And that was revelatory for the entire participating body. And what we wanted to do is to make sure that if you are a leader of one different group and I'm a leader of another, that because we had that experience together, we're more likely to let our people know, hey, they're cool, they're good, and we have a lot that we can learn from one another. And that's why all this is spilled out. It has to start in your school community, then it can go into your larger community, to the United States, and then it can spill out into the world as it has done for us. And what we did is we could not keep this to ourselves. And so this past year, after pitching this proposal to Narrative 4 and also to KVEC, who are both so committed to not only bringing people together, but as Jeff Hawkins likes to say, using the capital that we already have here, because we are rich in people who tell story, and we're also rich in compassion. We just need that empathy element. And so what we have done is we have this year initiated the first ever Appalachia cohort, which is a connection between KVEC and Narrative 4. And we had this process where teachers were able to go through a rigorous vetting process where they had to have an application. And when teachers were chosen, you're going to see right now on this screen that we're going to take what we call this empathy revolution, because you all, even in the midst of a pandemic, these ladies and gentlemen have already been meeting together to create a virtual platform so that they can learn about this experience, so they can already start taking it to their students. And even at the time of this broadcast, we already have one school that has implemented their very first story exchange. So when the 2020-2021 school year starts, these people are going to hit the ground running. And what you're going to find is after this first year, what you have seen with my classroom experience, it's going to happen exponentially. So we are so thankful and so filled with hope and possibility about what empathy is going to do in this area and in Appalachia. Now, if anybody would like to, on their own, find out some more things that have happened with my students and our experience with Narrative 4, you can check any one of these links out. And it is really unbelievable when you see what they have been able to do. And not only that, if you would like to know more, All you have to do is drop me a line. And as you can probably tell, I am passionate about talking about Narrative 4, and I'm also passionate about this opportunity that we have with our KVEC cohort. And I just want to thank you all for listening, and I want to thank KVEC for this opportunity.
Thank you, Mary. We are so excited about the opportunities we're being able to give these students from across our region, and we look forward to seeing what happens in the future.